Hey y'all, it's the Kings. It's me, just me. So I just wanted to record a little intro to this because I'm so excited that this author agreed to talk to me. I can't tell you how much we love her book. We just got it about a month ago. I think it just came out. It's at thecatholiccompany.com. I think I will put all the links below where you can find her books. I didn't even know she was an author of other books because we've just been obsessed with this one. So it's Farming and Homesteading with the Saints by Andie Andrews Eisenberg. And I know that some of you might not be Catholic. Some of you might not even know what Catholics think about the saints. And I encourage you, before you listen to this, to go kind of dive into that. And you might think that we're crazy, and that's okay, because our faith is so deeply rooted in history and beauty that I love our faith. And I know that there aren't many books about farming and homesteading with the saints, which is why this is so exciting for me and our family. When I say a million times in the interview, our daughter loves this book, I mean it. She really loves this book. So I hope you enjoy. I am going to blur my background or add a background because this currently is my shed. I threw a book curtain over this crazy bookshelf that I've got a giant mess right now. I am in the process. We're making this our outdoor food kitchen, I guess you would say. So our freeze dryer is going to be out here, and all of our canning and everything, and our egg operation, in addition to all my crafts. So it's a disaster in here. So the background, it is kind of distracting if you're watching on YouTube because my hat keeps going in and out of view, but it's our backyard this year. And I really want to do a podcast on how we decided the design for our backyard and all the things that you take into account for designing a backyard. And it's kind of a food forest, kind of a flower garden, kind of, where we live and play. So anyway, I will get to that, but the image behind me in the interview is an actual picture of our garden. It's not some stock photo, and which is, why it's quirky in itself. So I hope y'all enjoy it. If you have any questions, like I said, please do your own research on saints if you have any misgivings about that. I do hope you listen anyway, because there's so much beautiful information in there. I tend to overuse the word beautiful, but I hope y'all don't mind, because when I say it, I mean it. So I might mean it a lot. But anyway, thank y'all as always for listening, and I hope y'all enjoy. So hey, Andie, it's nice to meet you. I have had your book for since it came out, I guess. I saw it, I think, advertised on thecatholiccompany.com. And we bought it because it pertains to us in our life. So I was so excited to see you post in that Catholic moms group on Facebook, and I was able to reach out and we could get together. So yeah. You just told me you farm on 5 acres. Can you give us a little bit of a background of how that, I've read your foreword, obviously, but for our viewers, how that all started and what y'all do?
So we started out our farming journey in Western New Jersey in Hunterdon County, mostly because I had a very old quarter horse who needed to be retired due to a suspensory ligament injury. So he was no longer rideable, and I didn't want to keep boarding him at barns. So I said, I asked my husband, we were living on a ridge that overlooked New York City and another part of the state. And I'm like, can we bring Hook, was his barn name, home? Because I want to take care of him myself in his retirement. Mm-hmm. So we found a 3.5 acre plot of land out in Western New Jersey, and we moved there. But the only problem was, and I think a lot of maybe your listeners can relate to this, it was completely overgrown. It was, a barbed wire mess. It needed to be brush hogged. Although in Tennessee here, they say bush hogged.
We say bush hog. I was like,
I'm not sure what's correct. In New Jersey, they say brush hog.
Okay.
Say bush hog. So normally I just avoid it. Anyway, it needed to be taken care of. There were grapevines everywhere. The barn was broken down. Water lines were broken down. Everything was broken down, Kira. I could not even imagine how we were going to make it work, but there was a 2-stall horse barn, and I had a vision, and all we needed to do was bring it to life. And I think maybe that's the place where a lot of homesteaders come. They see a vision.
That is That's key, because if not, you get so overwhelmed,
Mhm.
and it's
So
easy.
yeah, it was a one project at a time. And if you're an impatient sort or a type A personality, it's going to be a lot harder to get there, because I think both people and the land need the time, you
Hmm.
know, to find their groove.
Right.
So in our case, we were bringing that land back to life. And by the time everything was restored, it was almost 8 months in. So when it was, we brought my horse home and got him a companion horse and a couple of goats. And I kind of sensed I was already in over my head a little bit.
With
Um,
the goats, everyone, you either love goats or you hate goats, but what goats do is they level you up to a spot where you may or may not be ready.
yes, exactly, exactly. Mischief makers. So once we kind of figured that out, on the 3.5 acres, we were very content. I was sure I was going to live and die on that plot of land. But then my daughter moved to Middle Tennessee,
Mm,
and she's my only. And I said, Mama's coming.
yeah. Oh,
So we found this 5 acre plot down here in Middle Tennessee, which was turnkey. It was a huge difference from
oh,
where we started.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely turnkey. I mean, the woman who lived here was an equestrian. She really had this property in great order.
Hmm.
Um, water in the barn, electricity in the barn, its own electrical panel, everything that we needed.
Wow.
It was got like going from pauper to prince,
Right.
in 3 years.
Hmm.
Um, so that was, but I appreciate that I had that first experience,
Hmm.
um, because it really kind of defined whether or not you're ready for this, and if you're not, get ready, because it's not going to be easy, but it will be so rewarding.
Right.
So, that's kind of the background of how I got into homesteading. As I said, started with the horse. I was a romance writer and I was writing a screenplay, and I needed to know how to ride a horse. And I was 51 years old and I had never been on one.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I know, crazy stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I got on the horse and I'm like, where have you been all my life?
Yeah. Aren't they
And
amazing?
yeah. And so once I got on those lesson horses and I rode a ton of them, I'm like, I
Hmm.
want my own horse.
That,
So you get
yeah,
right?
that's how it happens.
Yeah. Get your own horse, or your
You
horse
get bit
gets
by the bug.
you. Yeah. And that's how the whole thing spiraled. It was really, usually there's a catalyst event in somebody's life. Either you just decide you don't want to pay grocery store prices, or you have an animal already in your life, or you have this, we talked about before, vision of
Right.
what it could be.
Yeah.
So, that's how we got there. But when we were in that first farm, it was in the middle of a drought in 2017. There was no hay to be found. And what was able to be found was like $10 or $12 a bale. It
Mm,
was a really rough, rough, rough time for the farmers. And I realized they needed our prayers. Like,
mm,
that was my first glimmer that these farmers, that I was kind of totally, I was one of those, I go in the grocery store and I get what I need and I come home. My
right.
my food comes from the grocery store, right?
Mhm. Yeah. You
And
know that
then get
farm
into
was somewhere.
homesteading,
Yeah.
and the paradigm shifts and you go, wait, there are people who are
Mm,
working their butts off to make this happen. And, you know, combating the weather and hang on, my computer did something weird.
okay, fine.
Okay. Um, combating the weather and doing all these things. I said, I got to pray for them.
Mhm.
And that was the genesis of the book.
That's amazing.
Yeah. That's how it
Yeah,
came about.
just that little tiny, like you said, a glimmer of like they need our thoughts and prayers. Like it's someone grew this apple and they took pain and time and money and effort to grow that apple that you're eating in your hand.
Mhm.
And once you get it in your own space, then you realize it's not easy, which I think I've read in your forward. Like y'all saw bugs you'd never seen before
Mhm.
attack
Mhm.
your
That
crop.
is that is the absolute truth. And every time something happens on this farm, now I know who is my go-to to help me pray,
Right.
to pray with me, kind of like a shoulder to shoulder thing.
Hmm.
Um, because I don't think any farmer or homesteader can carry this yoke on their own.
No, faith is so important.
Yeah.
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 And it's part of the beauty of it too, because not only is it important to like lean on in harder times, it's I we talked about this before I hit record, but my background is currently our backyard that we've worked really hard on this year. And now we get, even when we used to have grass, tree truck companies had to come in and destroyed everything. So it was a mulch lot for most of last year. I never posted pictures of it anymore. It was ugly. And this year we had a baby and I was like, all right, now it's time. Like, let's make it into our vision. And in those moments where you can sit, and it's rare, but you have to make time to just sit and then just look at the glory of God throughout, like with your animals and your flowers and your vegetables, and bring in, like you said, bring in these saints even in the good times, and just have that partnership. I love that. Okay, so some of our listeners might not be Catholic, and I do want to hear about like how you became a writer. I'd love to hear all that, but before we get into that, can you give kind of a little, what do you mean when you say saints as partners? Or
Okay. So in the Catholic tradition, there are men and women who whose lives have been examined after their death and have been understood to be heroic in their virtue, in their love of God, in their actions, in their life. And those are people whom the Catholic Church embraces as knowing for sure, beyond a doubt, that they are with God in heaven, as opposed to in purgatory, or to understand the Catholic language, not quite there yet. Having said that, each of these saints, having been proven heroic in their lives, in their love of God, in their level of virtue that was above and beyond, I think, what ordinary human beings typically achieve in their lifetime, just because of our sheer humanity. These are men and women who, in their lives on earth, probably started out much like we did, and either through the pathway of the land found their holiness, their call to holiness, or for some kind of tragic event found their call to holiness, but they found their pathway. And having done that, the book is a means to find the saints who shared a hobby, or shared a vocation, or shared an occupation, or shared a dream or a vision that we have. And now that they're in heaven, can kind of be our cheerleaders. And, sainthood is really no different in a lot of ways than for the non-Catholic. Then if you ask a friend to pray for you or with you here on earth, or someone who has passed, a loved one, it's not any different than saying, will you pray with me? Will you pray for me?
right.
Because I know you are enjoying the beatific vision, and you, by your merits, you sweeten my prayers, because I know I can go directly to the Lord, and I do. But having their merits lifting up my prayers is what makes having a saint working with you, as I say, shoulder to shoulder, so edifying. And I will tell you, I have had really incredible experiences asking them to intercede for me, not just to work with me, but when I have a real serious issue on the farm, or with the health of an animal or a dying animal, I know their prayers have made a difference. So basically the concept of sainthood is this very personal friendship with someone who has passed and is enjoying the fruit of their labors in heaven.
Right. Yeah. And so that was a beautiful explanation. To add to that, we're all called to be saints, for just for our listeners, but we're talking about saints with a capital S.
Correct.
Like you said, they've been through all the rigors of the church. They've had miracles performed based on their prayers, and they're not dead in our view and in the Catholic Church's teachings, they are
Mhm.
very much alive in heaven. And it, just like you said, we can say like, hey, Andie, will you pray for me? I need a little help with my cow. I don't have a cow. When I get a cow, I need a little help with my cow. And it's just,
Or a goat. Definitely need help with the goat.
they got out this week, and of course, my husband was out of town, and I was like, I don't, and I'm having a baby, and I'm, you know, but yeah, so like St. Bridget, we have my daughter, and she's my oldest daughter's 4, and she has a book just on St. Bridget and her cows, and we would like a cow, we don't have one yet, and we constantly talk about that connection and how St. Bridget's cows, because she was so holy, would produce abundant milk to give to the poor, and how amazing that is that she, this little woman, was, or at that age, I think she was still a girl and she was doing that.
Little girl.
Yeah,
Yes.
she was milking and then just providing for, and it's such a beautiful testimony as a mother to teach my child through their stories, which is what we've been doing with your book. Now, I do have to say my husband reads these to her every night. This is her before night book.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
she loves it. So he is more versed in like which saint is which, but the fact that you have per animal, what's that not showing up in my picture, per animal is amazing, because we have a little miniature donkey, so we go to the donkey section. I mean, I love that, and I love how you explained how you set it up. But before we get further into the book, will you tell us kind of how you became a writer? And you said you wrote romance. Did you write novels or just scripts, or how did it all?
I wrote historical romance in very early in my writing life, and then I kind of switched over to Christian fiction, because that's where the Lord was leading me to write, and then I started writing horse-centric novels, women's fiction. So I have a book out. It's called Ephemeral. It's actually 5 years old now, but it still continues to do really, really well, which it's a, as an author, it always surprises you when your book does well, because you're your own worst critic, right? In any of the arts or whatever. But it's told from a horse's point of view.
Well, interesting.
So if anybody read Garth Stein's The Art of Racing in the Rain, it was told from the point of view of the dog belonging to a racehorse. I meant not racehorse, race car driver.
Okay.
And it kind of unfolds his owner's story through his eyes. And I said, well, I want to do this with a horse, my horse. And this is either going to be really, really good, or it's going to be really, really cheesy.
Yeah.
It could be very Mr. Ed-ish, it's like, it could be really horrible. But, lo and behold, it came out really well. And it seemed to resonate with a lot of women. And I call it women's fiction more than romance. It's really women's fiction, because it has some pretty deep issues in it. Things that when you get to be a woman of a certain age, stuff you just start to work through, like what went right, what went wrong, but told from the point of view of a horse. And of course, my goal was to make it an homage to the horse, and how misunderstood and often mistreated they are.
Right.
Many, many worlds, especially competitive worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got into writing the horse-centric novels. But even that has a very Catholic Christian point of view. If you're reading between the lines, you'll see it. And then people were very upset with the way it ended. And but I knew it was the only ending that could be. And if you are reading between the lines, you'll know that's the only ending it could have had.
Okay.
So I'm like, they're like, write the sequel, write the sequel. So I write the sequel, and nobody bought the book. I'm like, well, you asked me to write the sequel. So I gave you this nice fluffy sequel that will make you happy. And like, nobody read it. So
probably
but
because
anyway,
it's not realistic to be fluffy and happy. And
but Ephemeral did really, really well and continues to do well. And short of Farming and Homesteading with the Saints, I actually loved writing that book, because I felt it had a lot of traction and could go the distance. It'd be as true 20 years from now as it is today.
That's amazing. So what is it like for millennial age group, women work, or more?
Yeah, I would say it's not for children.
Okay. Okay.
If I had to rate it, I would rate it PG-13, maybe plus for adult content,
Interesting. Okay.
but not adult language.
Okay.
It was just themes,
I-
so to speak, that could be difficult.
yeah.
But generally, that was the book I wanted to write at the time. And then I received the call to write Farming and Homesteading with the Saints, which was after I did the sequel, in 2019. I was in church and I was actually working on the sequel, and I had writer's block in the worst way.
Mm,
And I'm like, and you always know when things aren't clicking, the Lord is probably trying to redirect.
right.
And I'm like, oh, this isn't working for me. And I go to adoration, which is going into a church and sitting before the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to write? Because this isn't working. Or maybe I'm never going to write again. I don't know. And
Yeah.
literally the title to the book came into my head. And I'm just sitting in this little chapel, and I'm looking at all these saints on the stained glass windows, and realizing I don't really know anything about them, but
Mhm.
for some reason the Lord was pointing me to them. And when it comes to homesteading, I think it's fair to say that your perspective changes,
Yeah.
because when you're not, thinking about going shopping or doing this or doing that, but you're looking at the skies and you want to know if it's going to rain. You want to
Right.
know if it's going to rain because you need more water in your trough, or you need to make sure your well isn't going to run dry.
Mhm.
When you have this whole different perspective from homesteading, all of a sudden your vision aligns differently. So whereas before I was kind of all about this modern culture, pop culture thing going on in the world, it was
Mhm.
like, is it going to rain? And what are those insects going to do to my vegetable garden?
Right.
And, your eyes are trained differently.
It changes everything. We did a podcast about living seasonally, and then you
Mhm.
see, I say beauty a lot, but it's so true. You see, there are difficulties in the seasons, but then there's so much before, like winter, it's cold and it's hot. We're in southern Georgia. I don't like it when it's cold. If it gets above 20 degree or below 20 degrees, like the world has ended, and I'm not sure how we're going to survive. But now that we live in the seasons, and you're forced to go outside to feed animals in that weather, and you're forced to go outside and try to grow something, and it
Mhm.
it's just special. Like, you understand that winter's a time for rest and coziness and
Mhm.
rejuvenation. You need that time because you've worked so hard in the spring and summer. And yeah, absolutely. And all of that aligns with our faith in God and
Mhm.
and rebirth in a way. Yeah.
Well, yes. And if you're attuned, and if you are able to get yourself attuned, if you're not already attuned, then your focus changes. So I understood why I had the writer's block, because that wasn't the world where God wanted me to operate or use my abilities anymore. And so when I started seeing things through the lens of homesteading and sustainability and cultivation and caring for the land, when my lens changed, so did the content of my writing.
Wow.
um, because I knew, and then it came easily. The research for this did not come easily. That was a year of research, of
Mm.
hard research. I could spend, for Saint Anne, who's the patron saint of equestrians, I spent probably well over a week, maybe 10 days, going down different rabbit holes on the internet, running items through Google Translator, contacting the shrines in Italy, trying to find out why. Nobody knew why St. Anne was the patron saint of equestrians. Nobody could answer the question. And
Mhm.
then finally, little by little, it's like that detective work. It finally all became to come together. You get one piece of the puzzle, and then you go on the next, and then on the next, and on to the next. And I'm like, I finally figured it out. So she's like one of my crown jewels in the book because of how long it took me to figure that out.
Right.
Uh, but just the tenaciousness you require, but God provides. I remember going to my spiritual director about I'm going to say about 40 or 50 hours into the book, which was 2 months maybe. And I said, I don't want to do this. I'm going to quit. I don't want to do it. It's too hard. I don't know, maybe I heard something wrong, because I don't think God would challenge me at this level to do this. And she asked me a really important question. She said, "Do you see this as a writing project or a God project?"
Yeah. Which that can apply to everything, can it? That question.
It sure can. It sure can. And when I sat with that question, and anybody who's listening, if you sit with that question, you will have a better understanding of your path forward.
Mhm.
Because it surely had that effect on me. So when I understood it was a God project and there would be pain and suffering because it was a God project,
Mhm.
then I was able to dig deeper and get it done.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but it
love
took,
it because your hours and hours of research are so compact and wonderful. And growing up, we had the old, I forget who published them, but the Saints books where it's one
the
through, I think we have,
Butler's Lives of Saints or whatever. Yeah.
Mhm. And you have the same ones, and they're, and a lot of them are from the Roman period, so there isn't that much information, but they were martyred in some horrific way. And so, I'm reading to a 4-year-old and I'm like, oh gosh, like
Yes.
St.
Yes.
Lawrence, they barbecued him.
Yeah. Yeah. They sure
Terrible.
did. Yeah.
Like,
They
how
sure
do
did.
you tell her that? And of course, I mean, we don't sugarcoat much, but you also don't want to say that he was like, I'm done on this side, turn me over.
God love them. But when you're sure of your path forward, that's what you do. You just take it all.
But this
Um,
is such a good, it's not, martyrdom is obviously an incredible gift to God and a testament to their holiness, but it's nice to see things besides that, like what did they do in their life that made them their
mhm,
belief so strong that they were willing to die for our Lord. So
mhm.
thank you for
Yeah,
writing it.
you're welcome. Sure.
We
Yeah,
thoroughly enjoyed it.
yeah, thank you. It actually had a long journey, almost 5 years to getting published, because after I wrote it in 2019 to 2020, I pitched it to a couple of Catholic publishers, and it was picked up by Tan Books first.
I love tan books. Yeah.
And Tan Books, I had a champion over there who loved the book, but it was the beginning of COVID. Things were grinding really, really slowly. The publishing landscape was changing. Indie publishing was becoming really, really big. Um, and they held it for a year. We went all through editorial, which took a year. Um, and then at the end of the year, my editor dropped dead of a heart attack. My champion editor, the acquisitions editor.
Oh,
The new guy who came in said, "Yeah, we're switching things up here, and we're going to release you from your contract."
they missed a big opportunity because COVID made this explode.
Exactly. So I was upset, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, get back in the saddle. So I sent out a couple query letters to people who had expressed some interest before TAM picked it up, and Loyola Press picked it up within 2 weeks.
Which is another great publishing company.
And that's when it's a God project, because that wasn't me. It wasn't any giftedness in how I pitched, my letter to them. It was because I really believed that the Lord wanted, and the saints wanted this known, So when things are right, they're right. And when things are wrong, they're wrong. And that's, I think, the lesson of farming too. I've discovered on the farm that when things are going poorly, take time to push through it. But
Mhm.
if you're constantly pushing through it, redirect, ask
Right.
the Lord, redirect.
Yeah, you
Um,
can't force it. Okay, I
yeah.
was looking in here for goats. I don't, are there goats in here?
Are there goats?
Mm-hmm.
There are ruminants in there. I don't know where they
Okay.
are, but there are
3 minutes.
ruminants.
Okay. Because so we are having baby goats at some point in the next few months. And so you know how people do goat yoga?
Hmm.
In Catholic, we obviously don't do yoga.
Right.
For all sorts of reasons. If anybody would like to look up, I'm not going to dive into that on here.
Right. That's
Um,
another podcast.
yes, exactly. That somebody else has already done. But I would love to do like goat, like Pilates or something
Sure.
with our baby goats. And I mentioned it to someone at our parish recently, and he was like, goats are not very biblical. Like, not
Or
very,
separate the sheep and the goats. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
looking in here, us joking about goats Are they in here?
Yeah. Well,
They're
we're
in the
raising
room.
sheep here, but the important thing is this is your first, what do they call it? Kidding, they call it. It's
Kidding,
lamb
right? Kidding
with
season.
sheep. We have sheep and it's kidding for goats, right?
Yes, yes.
And have you kidded on your farm before?
No, no, this is our first time. So,
So we had our first lambing experience. We're raising up Valley black-nosed sheep here,
okay.
which are not in the United States. The only way you can get them in the United States from New Zealand, the UK, and whatnot is to breed up, what they call breeding up. So we started out with a flock of F2s, which are 2 generations above Scottish Blackface, which is your foundation breed. And then we artificially inseminate with 100% purebred ram semen. And then we hope it takes, which is at about 60%.
Mm-hmm.
And if it does, you have lambing experience, 5 months later.
Right.
So we had our first lambing experience last March. And
Oh,
I will tell you, going back to the book, the saints that I asked to pray for us, especially we had some dystocia, we had some lambs who were having a hard time coming through. It was
mm-hmm.
our first time doing it. We really didn't know what we were doing. You can be intellectually prepared, but until you're in the moment
Right.
at 2 o'clock in the morning on a cold March, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's clutch. So we were very we had one who just was having a real difficult time delivering the twin. And I remember my pacing up and down the barn aisle and just invoking not only the namesake of that particular animal,
Mm-hmm.
Josie, St. Joseph for us, but it was all the other shepherd saints that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just ask and pray and ask and pray and ask and pray and ask and pray. And that baby, my husband got in there, got him out. We had to literally bring him back to life. But man, we just sent him off to live in New Jersey, with his twin, and he is just doing fine.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So, when it comes to your kidding experience,
Mm-hmm.
take hold of whoever you can in there, and Saint Isidore at the very least, who is our overarching patron saint
Mm-hmm.
of farming and homesteading. So, that's what we do. But I have since discovered in that book, if you read the Saint Germain is a shepherdess saint.
Okay.
And I was so moved just by the little bit I read about her that I went on and I wrote in 1 week a novella, a 67-page novella, kind of novelizing her life. I have it next to me, but this is the story of Saint Germain.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to write it not only because she was a patron saint of shepherdesses, but because I had seen the movie Sound of Freedom. I don't know if you had an opportunity
I
to.
I have young children, and I thought I'd
Yeah.
be scarred. I
Yeah,
will.
oh no. Yeah, I
I
don't think
will
it's
see it, but I'd want them to be very grown.
yes, but not only is she a patron saint of shepherds, but also of children who have been abused.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, that is a story for our time.
Yeah.
So it's like what's old is new again. I mean, the saints
Right.
are timeless. They never go out of style. You can always invoke them. And
Well, and human brokenness is also timeless. So,
amen to that. Amen to that. And people like Saint Barbara is in the book. Since I moved to Tennessee, we have tornadoes, which was
yeah.
not something I was familiar with. Do you have them there?
It's very rare, but whenever we get a hurricane, which I didn't know until I stayed for a hurricane, tornadoes come in hurricanes, big ones. So that was fun.
Yes, yes. So the weather saints became my friends in the tornado shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Because we actually had one built here for us in the house.
That's
We
nice.
have a limestone bedding here in Tennessee, so they don't do basements.
Yeah, we don't. We're at sea level, so we can't do them.
Oh, you can't either. So
Mm-hmm.
we had an above ground tornado shelter built, and we've been in it, I'd say 5 or 6 times in the 3 years we've been
Really?
here.
Wow,
Mhm.
that's a lot.
It is a lot. It is absolutely terrifying. And I will tell you, my husband and I and the dog, because we're empty nesters, go running into the shelter when we get the warning.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in one corner clutching the golden retriever. And I'm in the other corner with my rosary beads.
That's how, at the end of course, the hurricane came at night and it was moving. It was Matthew. We stayed for Hurricane Matthew and it was moving at 2 to 3 miles per hour. So it sat on top of us for like 6 hours at night. And my husband, he went to sleep. He and my mother-in-law came and stayed with us. She went to sleep. I had the rosary like dug into my hand because I was certain we were all going to die and they were just going to be asleep and I was going to pray for all of us.
Well, I hope they thanked you in the morning.
I mean, and then you lose all cell service. So like that was all I had. It's comforting in those moments when you think this might be it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always laugh and I say that's his therapy dog or he's his therapy person. I'm not really sure how that works, but it's okay. I got my beads. I'm good.
Right. I know.
Catch you on the other side.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. If I don't make it, at least we try. Yeah. No, it's terrifying moments. So what do you use your sheep for? I just interviewed, we normally, honestly, our podcast, especially since I was pregnant last year and being pregnant on the homestead has its challenges, but then I was basically like couch ridden, not bed ridden, but so I was pretty stagnant all of last year. So we started real strong with our podcast and then we kind of tailored off. But someone reached out for me to interview them about sheep recently, about dairy sheep. And so I loved interviewing her and you're, I think, only our third or fourth interview on the podcast. So what do you use yours for?
So Valais Black-Nosed sheep in Europe, Switzerland is where they originate from actually, are basically used for meat and wool. Their wool is suitable for textiles, more like felting, or you can spin it with other types of wool like merino and be able to knit with it. But by itself, it tends to be a coarse wool. But people here in the United States want them neither for meat, not really for wool, although there is a small demand in kind of boutique groups, knitting groups and things to see what they can do with it to experiment because it's not been here. But they want them for pets.
What?
The disposition of the Valais Black-Nosed sheep is such that they are truly like paddock puppies. That's what they call them.
Wow.
They are like golden retrievers. They want to hang out with you. You can teach them things. They want to love on you. They won't leave your side if you're there to hang out with. They will do anything for you and with you. And of course, they call them, quote unquote, the cutest sheep in the world. I don't know if you've seen pictures of them, but they have the completely black face. They have the very mop-like wool that hangs down in I want to say staple lengths of 10 to 12 inches or so when it's fully grown out, but they are just these big fluff balls. And they're not small. The girls, the ewes will get to be, they'll top out around 150, 170 pounds. And the rams, 325.
Wow.
So they're a beefy sheep. But again, here, they don't eat them and they don't use them. They're too valuable. So when you are able to get to domestic purebred, and if our lambing goes well this spring, we'll have our first domestic purebreds on the ground, which are what they call F4 for ewes and another generation to go for rams at F5. But at those levels here in the United States right now, kind of like the housing market, unless the bubble bursts, they're selling for about 20,000 a piece.
What? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had our last lamb crop, our first and last lamb crop in March. We had 4 ewes and 3 rams. And so, I'm sorry, 4 rams and 3 ewes, other way around. So we retained the 3 ewes because we want to breed up to level 4. And we sold all but one of our wethers. And in the United States, typically they wether anything under domestic purebred because you don't want to dilute the population. There's no point.
Mhm.
Have a ram, so we weather them.
Mhm.
Um, and because we're breeding to Swiss standards.
Okay.
And the beautiful thing is people in this country really care about breeding to the Swiss standards because we don't want to create a new breed. We
Right.
try to bring the breed here and create the best possible conformation and trueness to the breed.
Mhm.
So we just had our first big national show in Iowa earlier this month. It was the U.S. National Ballet show, and then there was also a show in New Jersey as well at the Fiber Festival. So there's a lot going on. I think you're going to see a lot more ballets, and of course, the price may come down over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Um, but I sold three of the Weathers, to a gal in New Jersey who just wanted animals to love on.
That's so cool. So how did you jump from horses to sheep?
So my horse that I brought home that started the journey for me, and the one who was on the cover of the book Ephemeral, colicked and died 2 years ago. He was my riding horse.
I'm sorry.
I thought he was going to go the distance. I thought he was going to live to 35, and then things happen like that. Couldn't save him.
You know that.
And so I was left with his aged companion mare,
Mm.
um, who was not rideable anymore. She had been extreme trail and a beautiful, beautiful horse. And I said, well, I'm going to get a horse that's only like 14 hands. So I don't have so far to fall because I'm older.
Right.
So I bought this horse. They told me she was 18. In fact, I just had the dentist out today. He aged her at 26.
Hmm.
Um, and so I already knew that was a year ago. I already knew my riding days were coming to a close for a lot of different reasons.
Mhm.
The barn that we're at here in Tennessee, it has six stalls, 6 horse stalls.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I'm not going to have 6 horses. I don't have the stamina for that or the funds for that. So that's not going to happen. So um, I had my 2 mares that I knew I was going to ride. I had a riding arena on the property. So again, one of those things coming full circle, Gary, where you look around at the land and
Mhm.
you let the land speak to you. And you're like, what are we going to do? I have these they're large ponies. They're like maybe, uh, 12 2, in terms of hands, maybe 13 hands. And I'm like, they're not going to graze all this land because we have a lot of pasture. And I'm like, what are we going to do? And I literally came across this picture of this sheep. I'm like, that is the cutest thing I've ever seen on the entire planet.
That's how I knew what you were talking about because they literally look like you said they're big, but in the pictures they look like puppies. Like,
Yeah.
they're just
And I
adorable.
said, I'm going to find out more about this. And so, research me starts, turning over rocks and going down rabbit holes. And I kind of figure out what's happening here in the United States because they only started breeding them up here in 2017 in earnest.
Wow.
So the project is pretty young
Yeah.
in terms of, what's going on here. But we got into it because I just looked at the land and I'm like, what are we going to do with it? What is it calling to be? And I'm like, it's good grazing land. Like
Mhm.
something should be grazing on this land. And so I looked into micro cattle, mini cattle,
Yeah.
and well, the cost was super high and the gestation was 11 months.
Yeah.
11 months, and I don't know if I'm going to get, a heifer or a bull.
Mm.
So, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. And then when it was gestation was 5 months with the sheep, I'm like, yeah, we'll give it a go. So I cobbled together a flock. 2 came from Pennsylvania, 2 came from Indiana. I cobbled together a flock of F2Us, and we
Mhm.
did our first AI a year ago, October. The conception rate was 100%. Now,
Wow.
say what you will, when your normal conception rate using artificial insemination is 40 to 60%. Not only that, we had 3 of them pregnant with twins and 1 pregnant with a single.
Wow.
So for me, that's the power of prayer.
Oh, yeah.
That's the power of intercessory prayer because it defies the odds.
Right.
literally defies the odds.
Yeah.
And so that's how we ended up going from 4 to 11 in 5 months.
It's amazing that
And
math.
then I'm like, is this really a good idea?
I know. That's what we just got ultrasounds on our goats, and one he couldn't see how many sacks, and the other one he was like, "There's 3 in here." And I looked at my husband. I was like, "We are not a goat farm. Like just because he'll keep all of them, and we only have 4 acres. Like we are not a goat farm.
Yeah.
We started with horses, and then it just gatewayed. We joke that people say chickens are gateway animals, or the horses are the gateway animals."
Well, I would agree with that, but the cross grazing in terms of just homesteading in general is really great between your chickens and your horses and your goats, because they're all host specific for parasites.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's been a real blessing for us to be able to cross graze. So
Yeah.
we let the horses follow whatever pasture the sheep have been in, and then we rotate them into a new pasture, every 3 weeks or so.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Our
we have
last
this.
said that they have pigs and they rotate their pigs after their sheep, and the pigs actually eat the sheep feces.
Oh, I don't know about that. I know the
Crazy.
chicken will grind it up. When
Yeah.
they're out there, they'll grind up anything, especially the horse manure.
Mhm.
But our chickens are on lockdown because we've had a really wily fox who took out a quarter of our flock.
Ooh. Do you have a livestock guardian?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a livestock guardian dog?
We do not, because we have close neighbors.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
even though they're native Tennesseans and would understand, I personally don't feel right about a dog barking all night.
Well, so we have 27 neighbors. We're literally we're right outside city lines, and we're in between 2 neighborhoods where they packed little houses everywhere.
Mhm.
So ours has to wear a bark collar at night because we did get animal control called on us.
Yep.
I can't tell you, she is worth her weight in gold. The other day, my daughter and I were in the coop feeding them. So we had just gotten all the ladies in, and a hawk or an owl, some gigantic bird, swooped down and picked up a squirrel. And our dog saw it and kind of barked because during the day she doesn't have it on. And I feel bad about it, but it's the only way to kind of balance being surrounded by human beings. So I went and took her and showed her where it was, and she literally barked up at this tree to the point where the hawk or whatever it was huge, flew away, and she chased it down I was like, the fact that she can handle an aerial predator. And there was just a recent bobcat sighting. And so we got a GPS collar for her brother who comes sometimes, her litter mate. And we've got coyotes and foxes that we've had a big issue with foxes being on our property, but the coyote was across the street and didn't even try to come here because she just patrols and she can get everywhere. We have fences and gates, but she's found her own ways. And her brother will leave the property. Now he doesn't live here full time. My mother-in-law has him, so she brings him during the week, during the day. But she has never left the property. You hear a lot of times where they'll roam and
Is it Pyrenees, Great Pyrenees?
She's a Great Pyrenees German Shepherd cross. I don't know, for whatever reason, I did everything wrong. When you're not supposed to buy backyard farm dogs. This dog just spoke to me. I don't know why. I had just seen a fox trying to get the chickens, and this litter came up, and I was like, I'll take 2. Thank you. And I don't know why. And it's funny because he's more German Shepherd. He kills the chickens. He will leave the property. She loves the birds, loves the goats. She goes and plays with the goats. So I can't tout a female Great Pyrenees enough. She's my 4-year-old's best friend. So
Really?
they're amazing. I would totally recommend it. I'm interested to see how she does with kidding season, because they'll be so little, and because we just got pigs recently and they're very squealy. And so she does get excited about them, and tries to get in their pen. So, but she's never killed anything.
And
But
you had them since they were puppies?
Puppies, yeah. And he basically comes to doggy daycare at our house every day. And so, and I read a whole lot about how to train them. And for him, and it sounded harsh at first, but then it makes sense because they're so strong. They're both 100 pounds. They're so strong that while they were growing and they were still really excitable, I would put them on a line on a cinder block so they could burst, but then like after a chicken, and then when they got close, it would pull them back enough, and they could, mind you, he could move the cinder block 2 acres if he wanted to. He would dig in, and but he couldn't get that initial burst. And then
Right. So he couldn't follow through with his adrenaline, you know.
exactly. And so eventually we took him off of that because we thought, and she, like I said, has never even tasted chicken, and he will rip open the cavity and enjoy it. And so then my mother-in-law comes to pick him up, and I'm like, don't let him sleep in your bed because he's going to throw up bones.
That's worse than the barn cat bringing you the mice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Ooh.
ours is not allowed in the house because she's a barn dog. And if she was in the house, she'd be the worst dog ever. Outside the house, I mean, she knows if anybody's on our property, she lets us know like immediately, because people will jump in to like, cut a tree limb or something, and they're amazing. Just like for our own peace of mind. And then you add on the animals, I know, and you'll look out there at night. You can see her. We've got lights, and you can see her shadow on this picture. There's a bridge right there, and you can see her she just watches. It's incredible. Their instincts are amazing. So that's my little ad for, you might need a Great Pyrenees.
Yeah, maybe I do. Although down here they call them Great Disappearanese because they run amok, right?
Right. So we got him a GPS collar. And unfortunately, of course, a week after we got him the GPS collar, because you can do the coordinates of your whole property. So it's way easier than anything else. Of course, he blew they call it a CCL, but it's an ACL in dogs.
Oh.
So that was unfortunate. But they're not cheap, but it was worth, once someone saw the bobcat down the road, I was like, that's it. Like he needs, because if you read about the males and females, and we have a friend out on a Texas cattle ranch, and he was like, you get the female first. They're smarter. They care more about the animals. He goes, and then you get the male when she's like 2 or 3, and the male will be the perimeter. He obviously marks his territory. He's louder. He's the one that basically she'll send out if you have a coyote or a fox pack, like a coyote pack. That it's amazing. The female will like send out the male to go after them, and he'll come back like bloodied. This is our friend's dogs. But he's fine. And then she stays and guards the livestock, so none of the pack comes around.
Isn't that a beautiful design? I mean, you can't make this up,
right? No,
you
can't.
It's what's wired into their being.
And that's what the adopt, don't shop. I totally get that, but then you need certain things sometimes in this case, for your livestock protection, and you're not going to get that in adopt, don't shop. Like that's ingrained in who they are, which is what it sounds like your sheep, like this, that lovey-doveyness of your sheep, that is not normal for sheep. That's very unheard of.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. Sorry, I just got up on a Great Pyrenees soapbox.
Yeah, no, that's all very helpful information, because we have the golden retriever now who never met a stranger, including any animal. He's like, hey.
Right, like completely useless as a farm dog, but sweet. Yeah, we have an Australian Shepherd, a cattle dog, and they weren't raised on a farm, but they have their natural like herding. And then we have an adopted mutt, and then a Malamute. And our Malamute is a absolute chicken murderer. I mean,
well, I was going to say, I would expect that. I would expect
awful. That. And I would never, like the latter two, one was picked up on the highway on the side of the road. One was fighting people and ended up with us. So I would never go actively get a Malamute. But it's a constant managing of what are you good at? And the Malamute's good at sleeping.
And they're really cute. They're really nice to look at. Yeah.
And they have no business being in Southern Georgia.
Well, I'll tell you, we have our neighbors have a son and daughter-in-law, lovely family, who have 2 Malamutes, and they'll sometimes drop the dogs off for pet sitting. And even though we have a woven wire fence between us, over 5 feet tall, when those dogs are in residence, those sheep are on lockdown. They're on the far pasture.
Yeah.
Just because I know it's instinctual,
and they are so effective. I mean, She's never gone after okay, I take that back. She also, obviously, we picked her up off the side of the highway, and she was like emaciated, and I've adopted her out from us 5 times, and she's come back every time. Nobody wants this dog, and she's a sweet dog. They're just a handful. They just
Yes.
are.
Yes.
And she's 14, so we're not adopting her out anymore. She's here to live out her life. But
Mhm.
she got out. She used to get out all the time, and it wouldn't matter. Like you said, we have this entire place fenced in, but she would find a way to get out. And she ate a kitten, ate it, like,
Yeah.
inhaled it.
Yeah.
Ew.
That that doesn't surprise me.
It's awful. So I haven't seen her with a larger livestock, but I would assume that they would be just as deadly. So that's
I would
probably,
think so. I would think so. I mean, that's survival instinct for them, where they were, what they were bred for and where you would expect it. So, and I think that's the thing. We just, go in full circles to respect, nature, the natural order. I mean, it exists and, they can't fit into our constructs. We also, we have to adapt to theirs and who they are and what they were bred for or what they're here for or whatever it is. And,
yeah.
kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Mhm.
Yeah, sometimes you're going to end up with with an animal that you adopted or you had a heart for or whatever it is. You kind of have to work out the kinks, but in general, I think it's being very intentional about how you build your farm.
Right.
Yeah, for us, that's been a big thing. Going back to what you said about your husband and having these amazing animals that are born and you just want to keep every single one. But then and I feel that way. I'm like, "Oh, I brought you into this world. You're mine. I have to take care of you forever and ever." And, but then you also have to look at your land and say, "What can my land support?"
Right.
And, for us, you'd be shocked, even though the ponies, yeah, they're good grazers, but going from 4 adult ewes to 11, a family of 11, a flock of 11, just you could see how handily they could overgraze the land.
Right.
And you just can't get that sentimental about, wanting to keep everyone. You do the best you can for that one, in placement or use or whatever it is, production, whatever wherever aspect of farming or homesteading you're coming from.
Mhm.
Um, but you have to be mindful of your land and what's going to keep your land alive too.
Right.
So, that was it for us. That enabled me, who tends to be a softie, to say, yeah, we can't keep them all.
Yeah.
Um, we have to find homes. We have to keep in mind what our longer term goals are and what's good for the land and what's good for the animals.
Right.
And that's enabled us to make those harder decisions easier.
Yeah. The homestead and the farm is such a beautiful place to find that balance of, I'm managing this, but it's not mine. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a steward, but I'm only here for a little while. And that's where we are. It's so difficult because there was a barn about a block from here. My husband proposed to me in front of his horse, and she died 6 months later. She colicked. And so she's buried. My listeners have heard this 1,000 times, but she's buried about a block from here where we were boarding her. Well, they sold that land and now there's a house on her. And like, once that land is gone, it's gone. It's you'll never get
Right.
it back. And I understand people have homes and they have families there, and that's great. But like, being a steward to wait, the latter half of our property, I don't know if you can see in this picture, are woods. And
Mhm.
we're gonna leave them woods. We don't have beautiful pastures. We have what my horses have turned into a dirt lot and then woods. But in those woods is so much life. And
Mhm.
you realize, and then you see like people who sell their houses next to us and they're like, we back up to woods. I'm like, yeah, there are woods that you would have torn down and put a house on.
Mhm.
But it's treasure. It's just treasure. And when you get to be a part of that management, but then not control, because you can't control. I think it was in your forward, you were talking about the rain, those first couple years at your first home. I like, what are you going to do about that? You have to figure it out, but then you can't control too much or too little, or that's entirely where you put your hands up to God and say, I'm at your service. What do you want me to do?
Well, I say this, two things biblically speaking is number one, the Bible verse, unless the Lord builds the house, you buildeth in vain.
Mhm.
And I feel that substitute the word farm, unless the Lord buildeth the farm, you build in vain. And
True.
Saint Mother Teresa, always talked about being a pencil in God's hands.
Yes.
So I'm just an instrument, I'm just a pencil in God's hands. And when I think about farming and I think about homesteading, what I think most is that all of us who venture into this way of life, and this ministry, if you want to call it mission ministry, we are all just, rakes or spades or shovels in the Lord's hands. We're just trying to bring forth fruit that will last.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just for us, it's for the generations coming behind us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and so if we allow ourselves to be that, then maybe we do get to give the gift of the land to the next generation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe
So,
they can see what woods look like. Because
that's right.
they're it's
Exactly.
thinning. I mean, Savannah blew up when COVID happened. And everybody, it's in the South. It's a beautiful climate. It's a beautiful city. And there are so many people not from here. What I mean, you said, was it during COVID that y'all moved to Middle Tennessee?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody just kind of dispersed, unlike, I mean, since I guess the westward expansion. I mean, that would be the only time.
Similar.
Yeah. And so you see that my Savannah growing up is already different. It's already different. And you have to go an hour away to see what it looked like. Not the historical downtown part, but the actual land. You either go to a state park or you
Mhm.
go an hour and a half away, and it just
Sure.
expanding. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something obviously homesteaders feel strongly about, or they wouldn't live this life, because it's not easy. It's not easy.
No, no, but it's worth it. Like anything else, it's
So
not
worth
easy, but
it.
it's
And
worth it.
thankfully you wrote a book with friends to talk to
I,
on
I
and
did.
ask for help.
I did.
Well, thank you so much for this. Is there anything else that you want to add? I know you talked about your latest book, or no.
No, I'm gonna say, that old 70s, keep on keeping on, because if we don't do it, nobody else will, you
Yeah,
know.
that's
Um,
what Father Mike said in one of his homilies recently, and it has spoken to me so much. And I didn't know what a spiritual director was until a few years ago. I'm a cradle Catholic, but I didn't know what that was, and I
mhm,
finally just got one, and it's amazing. It's like this prayer friend that can help me, this
mhm.
mentor. But I was talking to her about it, and she was like, okay, but you still have to keep things, balanced. But Father Mike said recently, I think, if not you, who? If not you, who? And just like you said earlier with that question, like, does it glorify God what you're doing? Then
Mhm.
you should probably do it. I reworded what you said because I couldn't remember exactly.
Yeah,
But
close.
if not you, who? Who's gonna do this? And there might be somebody behind you, but there might not be. And they might.
That might not be is right. So, if they can look to it and say they're happy, they're gratified, they're living their faith, they're living their best life, they're sustaining the land, they're feeding their families,
Mhm.
I want to do that too.
Yeah.
So
Such
I think
joy.
programs like yours is really important, because it's like, yeah, it's hard, but there's a whole community of people who are working with you, here and in heaven. There's a whole community of people who are rallying for you. So I think that spirit of fellowship is really important.
That's such a beautiful sentence. And I could like put that on the wall. That spirit of fellowship with people here and in heaven. I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, is there anywhere, do you have social media, or where are your books listed?
You can find most of my books on Amazon under Andie Andrews, or Andie Andrews Eisenberg in the case of the Saints book. And I have a website, All Saints Valet. I keep a blog from a faith perspective, on raising up our valet sheep.
Okay.
So that's All Saints Valet.
And that's valet, like a valet car.
All Saints, VALAIS. So All
Okay.
Saints Valet blacknosesheep.com.
Okay.
Um, very long.
Yeah.
Um, and I have andieandrewsbooks.com, which I don't really keep up with, because for me, I kind of identify as a shepherdess at this point in my life. So
Isn't that
that's where,
amazing?
yeah,
I
that's
was
where I put
just
my effort.
talking to my 17-year-old sister, and I was like, don't box yourself in. Like, our lives are short here, but we also have time to fill them with, you were an author, now you're a shepherd. Like, you were a mother, that's amazing.
Mhm.
There's
Well,
never,
thanks
you
for
never have to
having me.
stop.
No, you don't. Keep reinventing, keep listening, because the Lord will give you your marching orders if you're paying attention.
Absolutely. Okay. So any social media or just
Um,
blog on your
I'm on
website?
Facebook, same All Saints Ballet.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will link all of that below. And thank you so much, Andie. I really appreciate you
Thanks
coming
for having me, Kira. It was a delight to talk to you and to share. And I'm gonna put that Great Pyrenees on the radar.
Yeah. Sorry for my infomercial.
Oh no, that was awesome. That was very informative.
She's
Love
our
it.
best friend. All right. Thanks, Andie.
Thank you too.